One day, you'll understand.
30 years of loyalty disappeared in less than 3 minutes. As employees stood frozen inside a gleaming corporate headquarters, 60-year-old Linda Harper walked toward the exit carrying nothing but a small cardboard box. She never argued. She never begged. She simply looked up at the CEO's office, smiled through quiet disappointment, and whispered, "One day, you'll understand." 3 days later, the man who approved her dismissal opened a package that revealed a truth buried for decades, a truth that would change everything he believed about loyalty, leadership, and the woman he thought he barely knew. Before we go any deeper, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. The package contained old photographs, handwritten letters, and a single document that made CEO Ethan Walker lose all composure. For the first time since taking over the company, he questioned whether the biggest mistake of his career had been made 3 days earlier. The employee he had dismissed without a second thought had quietly shaped the future of his family's business long before he ever walked into the executive office. Stay with us until the very end, because the truth behind Linda Harper's dismissal becomes an unforgettable story of sacrifice, gratitude, and a promise that survived 3 decades. For 30 years, Linda Harper arrived before sunrise and often left long after the lights in most offices had gone dark. She never held an executive title, never sought recognition, and never appeared in company newsletters. Yet nearly everyone who worked inside Walker Industries knew her name because she was the first to offer help whenever someone needed it. New employees quickly learned that if they had a question, Linda always had an answer. She remembered birthdays, celebrated promotions, comforted grieving families, and welcomed every new hire with genuine kindness. To many, she was more than a long-time employee. She was the steady heartbeat of a company that had grown from a small family business into a nationally respected corporation. Long before Ethan Walker became Chief Executive Officer, Linda had worked alongside his grandfather, the company's founder. She witnessed the business survive economic downturns, fierce competition, and moments when its future seemed uncertain. Through every challenge, she remained loyal, believing the company stood for something greater than quarterly profits and impressive financial reports. When Ethan inherited Walker Industries after his father's retirement, he arrived with bold ideas and an ambitious vision. Educated at prestigious universities and admired for his business instincts, he promised investors he would modernize every department. Efficiency became his highest priority, and difficult decisions followed almost immediately. Within months, outside consultants examined every corner of the company. Departments were reviewed, expenses were questioned, and employees with decades of experience suddenly found themselves measured by numbers on spreadsheets. Years of commitment could no longer compete with statistics, and loyalty became harder to quantify inside conference rooms filled with charts and projections. Linda watched these changes quietly. She never complained to her coworkers or questioned management publicly. Instead, she continued encouraging everyone around her, reminding nervous employees that difficult seasons eventually passed. Even as uncertainty spread through the building, her calm presence became a source of comfort for people who feared their futures. There was, however, one habit Linda never abandoned. Every Friday afternoon, after most employees had gone home, she unlocked a small drawer inside her desk and spent several quiet minutes reading a faded letter. No one ever saw its contents, and whenever footsteps approached, she carefully returned it to the drawer before locking it once again. A few longtime employees noticed the ritual over the years, but respected her privacy. They assumed the letter carried memories too personal to share. None of them imagined it held answers connected not only to Linda's life, but also to Ethan Walker's family and the company he now believed he understood completely. As pressure from investors increased, Ethan demanded another round of cost reductions. Managers were instructed to identify positions they considered unnecessary. During one executive meeting, Linda Harper's department appeared on the screen beside a recommendation that described it as outdated, inefficient, and ready for elimination. Ethan approved the proposal without ever asking a single question about the woman whose name appeared on the final page. He believed he was making a responsible business decision. He had no way of knowing that within 3 days, a forgotten promise and a collection of hidden memories would force him to confront a truth capable of changing his understanding of leadership forever. On Monday morning, Linda Harper walked into Walker Industries exactly as she had for the past 30 years. She greeted the security guards by name, wished the reception staff a pleasant morning, and placed fresh flowers on the welcome desk, as she did every week. No one who smiled back at her realized the day would end with a farewell nobody expected. Shortly before noon, an email instructed Linda to report to the Human Resources office. She folded her reading glasses, straightened the papers on her desk, and quietly made her way upstairs. Several co-workers noticed the unusual request and exchanged concerned looks, sensing that another difficult announcement was about to unfold. Inside the conference room, 2 human resources managers waited with carefully prepared documents. Their voices were polite but strained as they explained that her position had been eliminated during the company's restructuring. They thanked her for 3 decades of dedication before sliding a separation agreement across the polished table. Linda listened without interruption. She asked only one question. Was this Mr. Walker's decision? After a brief silence, one manager nodded. Linda smiled gently, signed every document without hesitation, and thanked them for treating her with kindness. Her calm response left everyone in the room searching for words they could not find. As Linda packed the few personal belongings from her desk, employees gathered nearby, struggling to understand how someone who had devoted so much of her life to the company could leave so quietly. Some offered hugs while others wiped away tears. Linda comforted each of them instead of seeking comfort for herself. Before reaching the lobby, she stopped beside the executive assistant responsible for Ethan Walker's schedule. From her handbag, she removed a sealed envelope and a small package wrapped in plain brown paper. "Please give these to Mr. Walker exactly 3 days from today," she said softly. "Not before. Promise me." The assistant hesitated before accepting them. She wanted to ask questions, but something in Linda's expression suggested the answers would come in time. Linda thanked her, placed the package on the desk, and continued toward the main entrance with the same quiet dignity that had defined her entire career. Outside the building, Linda paused for one final glance at the headquarters she had helped support for 3 decades. She smiled toward the top-floor office where Ethan Walker worked and whispered the words that puzzled everyone who heard them. "One day, you'll understand." Then she turned and disappeared into the afternoon crowd without looking back. The next 3 days passed quickly for Ethan. Meetings with investors filled his calendar, new restructuring plans occupied his attention, and the dismissal of another longtime employee barely crossed his mind. He believed the company was moving confidently into the future, unaware that the past was already making its way back to his office. On the morning of the third day, Ethan's executive assistant entered his office carrying the sealed envelope and the brown package Linda had left behind. She quietly explained that Linda had requested they be delivered only after 3 full days had passed. Curious but unconcerned, Ethan reached for the envelope, never imagining that the first page inside would leave him unable to finish reading the next sentence. Ethan unfolded the first letter expecting a farewell message. Instead, he found a single sentence written in careful handwriting. "If you are reading this, then the promise I made to your father has finally come to an end." He read the line twice before turning the page, his confidence giving way to quiet confusion. The next pages were filled with dates stretching back more than 30 years. Every entry described a difficult moment in the company's history, followed by a brief note explaining how each crisis had been resolved. Ethan recognized many of the events from stories his father had shared, yet one detail appeared again and again. Linda Harper had been present every time. Still uncertain, Ethan opened the brown package. Inside rested faded photographs, neatly organized folders, and an old leather journal. One photograph immediately caught his attention. It showed his late father standing beside Linda at the groundbreaking ceremony for the company's second manufacturing plant. Ethan had seen dozens of family photographs over the years, but he had never seen this one. He continued searching through the package until another photograph stopped him. This time, he saw himself as a little boy sitting inside the company cafeteria with a birthday cake in front of him. Standing just behind him was Linda, smiling proudly while his father looked on. Ethan struggled to remember that afternoon, but the warmth in the photograph felt unmistakably real. The journal contained dozens of handwritten entries. None of them focused on Linda's own sacrifices. Instead, every page documented employees who had quietly received help during seasons of hardship. Medical expenses had been covered. Children's school supplies had been purchased. Grocery bills had been paid. Rent had been settled before families lost their homes. Each act had been recorded without seeking recognition. Several receipts were attached beside the entries. Ethan noticed the payments came directly from Linda's personal savings. The amounts were sometimes small and sometimes substantial, but together they represented years of quiet generosity. He leaned back in his chair, trying to understand why someone earning an ordinary salary would willingly carry burdens that belonged to no one else. Then he discovered a sealed envelope addressed in his father's handwriting. The words across the front read, "To Ethan, only when Linda decides the time is right." His hands trembled as he carefully broke the seal. Until that moment, he had no idea his father had left behind one final message that had never reached him. The letter began with an apology. Ethan's father admitted there were parts of the company's history he had deliberately kept hidden because he believed one day his son would have to discover the truth through experience instead of inheritance. He wrote that leadership could never be measured by profits alone because every successful business was ultimately built upon people who chose faithfulness when nobody was watching. As Ethan continued reading, one paragraph stood apart from all the others. His father wrote, "If Linda Harper ever leaves this company before she chooses to retire, then I have failed to teach you the greatest lesson I ever learned. Before you judge her by her position, learn what she protected, what she sacrificed, and why I trusted her with something I trusted no one else to keep." Ethan lowered the letter and stared through the glass wall of his office. The bustle of another workday continued below, yet everything around him suddenly felt distant. For the first time since becoming chief executive officer, he wondered whether the decision he considered routine had uncovered a truth his father had spent decades trying to preserve. Ethan read his father's letter again, this time more slowly. Every sentence carried a weight he had overlooked moments earlier. His father never exaggerated, never wrote dramatic words for effect, and never trusted easily. If he had placed Linda Harper at the center of his final message, there had to be a reason far greater than Ethan could yet understand. Determined to uncover the truth, Ethan canceled every meeting on his calendar. His executives were surprised. Investors were left waiting. For the first time since becoming CEO, quarterly reports and expansion plans no longer seemed urgent. There was only one question that mattered. Who was Linda Harper beyond the employee file he had approved without reading? His first stop was the company's archive room, a quiet space rarely visited by anyone outside the records department. Shelves stretched from floor to ceiling, holding thousands of documents dating back to the company's earliest years. An elderly archivist named Martha had worked there for decades. When Ethan mentioned Linda's name, Martha smiled before quietly shaking her head. "I wondered how long it would take," she said. "Your father always believed this day would come." She unlocked a cabinet that required a separate key and carefully removed several thick binders. Each one contained company records, board meeting minutes, handwritten correspondence, and newspaper clippings that had never been placed in the public archives. One newspaper headline immediately caught Ethan's attention. It described a financial crisis that had nearly forced Walker Industries into bankruptcy almost 30 years earlier. Ethan remembered hearing only fragments of that story as a child. His father had always insisted the company survived because loyal people refused to give up. He had never explained exactly what that meant. Martha opened another folder and pointed to a series of handwritten notes attached to emergency financial reports. Every page carried Linda Harper's signature beside recommendations that had saved jobs instead of eliminating them. She had negotiated with suppliers, convinced lenders to extend deadlines, and quietly persuaded several senior managers to accept temporary pay reductions rather than laying off hundreds of employees. Ethan stared at the documents in disbelief. Linda's job title never reflected responsibilities like these. According to official records, she had spent most of her career in administrative support. Yet the papers before him revealed she had influenced decisions that shaped the company's future during its darkest years without ever asking for recognition or authority. "Your grandfather trusted her judgment completely," Martha said softly. "When difficult choices had to be made, he often asked Linda what the numbers could never tell him. She reminded everyone that behind every employee number was a family depending on this company. Your father inherited that way of thinking. He hoped you would too." As Ethan continued searching through the files, he found another document unlike the others. It was a confidential agreement signed by his grandfather, his father, and Linda Harper. Most of the page remained familiar legal language until his eyes settled on one sentence highlighted in blue ink. The agreement referred to a promise that would remain confidential until the day Linda herself decided it should finally be revealed. Ethan slowly closed the folder, realizing he had uncovered only part of the story. Whatever promise his father had written about was still hidden somewhere beyond the archives. And with every new discovery, one painful truth became impossible to ignore. The woman he had dismissed after 30 years of unwavering loyalty had been carrying responsibilities that even the company's chief executive had never been allowed to see. Ethan left the archive room carrying the confidential agreement, but one question refused to leave his mind. As Ethan prepared to leave, Margaret reached into a drawer and handed him a small brass key attached to an old leather tag. Written across the tag were three simple words: Founder's Office Cabinet. Margaret looked directly into Ethan's eyes before speaking again. Your father told me to give you this only if you ever came searching for the truth yourself. That evening, after every employee had gone home, Ethan unlocked the old cabinet hidden inside his late father's private office. Behind stacks of carefully arranged files rested a small wooden box. Inside lay a single sealed envelope with Linda Harper's name written across the front. Beneath it rested another envelope addressed to Ethan, carrying just one handwritten instruction from his father. Read Linda's letter first. Only then will you understand why she could never tell you the truth herself. Ethan carefully lifted the envelope bearing Linda Harper's name. The paper had turned slightly yellow with age, and the seal remained untouched. Whatever was inside had waited years for this moment. He took a slow breath before opening it, realizing his father had expected this day long before he became chief executive officer. The letter was written in his father's familiar handwriting. Linda, if Ethan is reading this, it means the time has finally come. You kept your promise far longer than I ever asked, and for that I will always be grateful. I know you never wanted recognition, but some truths should never remain hidden forever. Ethan continued reading, his heart beating faster with every line. When your mother passed away, I nearly walked away from this company. I was grieving, overwhelmed, and convinced I could no longer lead. The board wanted someone else to take control. Investors were already preparing for the worst. His father explained that during those painful months, Linda became the steady presence that held everything together. She coordinated meetings, reassured anxious employees, organized financial records, and quietly reminded him why the company had been founded in the first place. She never claimed credit, yet many of the decisions that saved Walker Industries began with conversations no one else ever witnessed. The next paragraph revealed an even greater sacrifice. Linda had received an attractive offer from another corporation that would have doubled her salary and provided an executive position. She declined it without hesitation. In her reply, she wrote only one sentence. I gave my word that I would stay until the Walker family no longer needed me. Ethan paused, staring silently at those words. He thought about every promotion Linda had refused, every late evening she had spent helping others, and every opportunity she had quietly set aside. None of it had been driven by obligation. She had simply chosen to honor a promise that everyone else had forgotten. He reached for the second envelope addressed to him. His father's handwriting appeared steadier than before, as though every word had been chosen with care. Ethan, if Linda ever leaves this company because of your decision, you must not waste time defending yourself. Go and find her. Listen before you speak. There are lessons she can teach you that no business school ever could. Another folded page slipped from the envelope and landed gently on the desk. It contained Linda's original resignation letter, dated nearly 20 years earlier. Across the top, Ethan's father had written in blue ink, "Rejected." Beneath it was another handwritten note. Your place is here if you are willing to stay. Linda had stayed another 20 years without ever mentioning that moment to anyone. By now, Ethan's eyes were filled with tears. The woman he had dismissed with the stroke of a pen had spent half her life turning away better opportunities because she believed keeping her promise mattered more than advancing her career. She had protected his family's legacy while asking for almost nothing in return. As he gathered the letters, One final item slid from the bottom of the wooden box. It was a folded piece of paper with a residential address written neatly across the front in Linda's handwriting. There was no message, no explanation, only the address. Ethan looked at his watch, picked up his car keys, and walked out of the office with a single purpose. Before another day passed, he was going to find Linda Harper and finally hear the rest of the story from the only person who had lived every chapter of it. The drive to Linda Harper's home felt longer than any journey Ethan Walker had ever taken. Every traffic light seemed to delay him, and every mile gave him another reason to regret the decision he had made only days earlier. For the first time since becoming chief executive officer, he was no longer thinking about shareholders, profits, or quarterly reports. He was thinking about a woman whose loyalty had quietly shaped his entire life. As evening settled over the neighborhood, Ethan turned onto a peaceful street lined with modest homes and well-kept gardens. The address led him to a small white house with a wooden porch and blooming flowers along the walkway. There were no signs of wealth or luxury, only the warmth of a place that had been cared for with patience and gratitude over many years. He stepped out of his car and noticed a moving truck parked in the driveway. Several neatly packed boxes sat near the front door. His heart sank. Linda was preparing to leave. He wondered if he had already arrived too late. Gathering his courage, he walked to the porch and gently knocked on the door. A few moments later, the door opened. Linda stood quietly before him, dressed simply, her expression calm and welcoming. She did not appear surprised to see him. Instead, she smiled with the same gentle kindness she had shown on the day she left Walker Industries. "Good evening, Ethan," she said softly. "I was wondering how long it would take." Ethan struggled to find the right words. Every apology he had rehearsed during the drive suddenly seemed too small. Finally, he spoke from the heart. "Linda, I'm so sorry. I judged you by a job title instead of the life you devoted to this company. I thought I understood what leadership meant, but I was completely wrong." Linda invited him inside without hesitation. The home reflected the same quiet character she carried everywhere else. Family photographs rested on shelves beside old books and carefully framed memories from decades gone by. There were no expensive decorations, only reminders of relationships, gratitude, and a life built around serving others rather than seeking attention. She poured 2 cups of coffee and sat across from Ethan at the kitchen table. For a few moments, neither of them spoke. The silence was comfortable, as though Linda understood he needed time to gather his thoughts. Finally, Ethan placed his father's letters on the table between them. "I've read every word," he said, "but I still feel like there's something missing. My father trusted you more than anyone. My grandfather did the same. They both believed you protected something far greater than the company itself. What was it?" Linda rested her hand gently on the letters before answering. "Your father believed businesses could always recover from financial losses. What worried him most was losing the heart of the people who built them. Every difficult decision he made began with one question: how will this affect the families depending on us? He asked me to remind him of that whenever pressure made him forget." She smiled gently as memories filled her eyes. "After your mother passed away, he carried more pain than anyone realized. There were mornings when he questioned whether he could continue leading the company. I never rescued him, Ethan. I simply reminded him of the promise his own father had made when Walker Industries opened its doors. Build a company where people matter more than numbers." Ethan listened in complete silence. At that moment, he understood the greatest secret had never been hidden inside envelopes or locked cabinets. It had lived inside the values his family once protected but had slowly allowed to fade. And as he looked at Linda Harper sitting across the table, he realized the hardest conversation was still ahead. There was one question he had come to ask, and he feared the answer more than anything else. Would she ever forgive him? Linda looked at Ethan for several quiet moments before answering. There was no anger in her eyes and no desire to make him feel guilty. Instead, there was the calm confidence of someone who had carried disappointment without allowing it to become bitterness. When she finally spoke, her voice was gentle enough to surprise him. "Ethan," she said, "I forgave you before I ever walked out of that building." He lowered his head, unable to meet her eyes. Those words hurt more than any accusation could have. He had expected resentment, but forgiveness only magnified the weight of his mistake. "I knew why you made the decision," Linda continued. "You trusted reports instead of relationships. You believed numbers told the whole story because no one had shown you what those numbers could never measure. That doesn't make you an evil man. It makes you a leader who still has something important to learn." Tears filled Ethan's eyes as he whispered, "I don't deserve your forgiveness." Linda smiled softly. "Perhaps not today, but deserving forgiveness was never the reason to give it. Your father taught me that people grow when someone believes they can become better than they are at their worst." For the first time in years, Ethan allowed himself to be completely honest. "I've spent my entire career trying to prove I was strong enough to lead this company. I thought making hard decisions without emotion was a sign of good leadership. Now I realize I never truly understood the people who trusted me with their future." Linda slowly stood and walked toward a bookshelf in the corner of the room. From the top shelf, she carefully removed a small wooden frame and placed it in Ethan's hands. Inside was an old photograph of his grandfather standing in front of the company's first workshop. Around him were only 12 employees, all smiling proudly despite the modest building behind them. On the back of the photograph, Ethan found a handwritten message from his grandfather. "Never measure success by how large this company becomes. Measure it by how many lives become better because it exists." Ethan read the sentence again, his voice trembling as he realized he had never seen those words before. Linda explained that his grandfather kept the photograph on his office desk every day until his retirement. When Ethan's father became CEO, he did exactly the same. After his father's passing, Linda quietly kept it safe, hoping one day the right moment would come to return it to the next generation of the Walker family. Ethan held the photograph close, understanding that the greatest inheritance his family had left behind was never the company itself. It was the responsibility to protect the people who gave their time, their talent, and sometimes their entire working lives to help that company succeed. He looked at Linda with renewed determination. "Please come back to Walker Industries," he pleaded. "Not because I want to correct my mistake, but because our employees still need you. I need your guidance. Help me rebuild what I've failed to protect." Linda smiled warmly before quietly shaking her head. "My work at Walker Industries was completed the day you came through my front door searching for the truth instead of excuses. The company doesn't need another Linda Harper. It needs an Ethan Walker who remembers every lesson you've learned this week. If you can do that, then my 30 years of service were never wasted." Those words stayed with Ethan long after he left Linda's home. As he drove back toward the city beneath the fading evening sky, he knew the next morning would begin a new chapter for Walker Industries. This time, the changes he introduced would not be measured only by financial reports. They would be measured by the people whose lives depended on the decisions made inside the executive office. The following morning, Ethan Walker arrived at Walker Industries before anyone else. He carried the old photograph of his grandfather in one hand and Linda Harper's letters in the other. Standing alone inside the quiet lobby where Linda had walked out only days earlier, he looked toward the front entrance and imagined the moment she left with nothing but a cardboard box. That memory would stay with him for the rest of his life. Instead of going directly to his office, Ethan called an emergency meeting with every executive, department manager, and board member. News of the unexpected meeting spread quickly through the building. Employees wondered if another round of layoffs was about to be announced. The atmosphere felt tense as everyone gathered inside the company's largest conference room. When Ethan entered, there were no presentation slides, no financial charts, and no printed reports waiting on the tables. He stood quietly for a moment before speaking. 3 days ago, he began, I made the worst decision of my career. I dismissed someone whose value I never took the time to understand. I confused efficiency with wisdom, and I forgot that every decision made in this building affects real people. The room became completely silent. Several executives lowered their eyes, realizing exactly who he was talking about. Ethan continued without hesitation. Linda Harper gave 30 years of faithful service to this company. While many of us focused on profits, she focused on people. While others sought recognition, she quietly carried responsibilities few of us even knew existed. He placed his grandfather's photograph on the conference table where everyone could see it. This company was never built to become the largest. It was built to become the most trustworthy. Somewhere along the way, we allowed that purpose to fade. Beginning today, that changes. Ethan announced the immediate cancellation of every planned layoff until each employee's contribution could be reviewed personally instead of reduced to numbers on a spreadsheet. He also established a new employee advisory council made up of workers from every department, ensuring that experienced voices would help shape future decisions instead of being ignored. Then he introduced another change that surprised everyone in the room. The company's annual leadership award would no longer recognize only financial performance. It would honor employees who demonstrated compassion, integrity, and service to others. Ethan announced that the award would forever be known as the Linda Harper Legacy Award. Word spread through Walker Industries within hours. Employees who had feared for their jobs found themselves talking about hope instead of uncertainty. Retired workers began calling one another after hearing the news. Many of them smiled through tears because they knew Linda had never wanted attention. Yet the values she had lived by were finally becoming part of the company's future. That afternoon, Ethan drove back to Linda's house one final time. He carried no contracts, no job offers, and no speeches. Instead, he brought a simple plaque bearing the words, "Thank you for teaching us that people will always be the greatest investment a company can make." Linda accepted the gift with quiet gratitude. She looked at Ethan and smiled the same way she had on the day she walked out of Walker Industries. "Now you understand," she said softly. Ethan smiled through tears because he finally did. The greatest leader in the history of Walker Industries had never occupied the corner office. She had never held the title of Chief Executive Officer or appeared on the cover of business magazines. She had simply lived each day with honesty, humility, and unwavering faithfulness, proving that true leadership is measured not by the authority we hold, but by the lives we quietly change. So what do you think? Did Ethan Walker deserve Linda Harper's forgiveness after everything that happened? Have you ever seen someone give years of loyalty only to be overlooked when it mattered most? Share your thoughts and your own experiences in the comments below. We'd love to hear your story. If this message touched your heart, please subscribe and join us for more inspiring stories that remind us why kindness, integrity, and compassion will always leave the greatest legacy. Until next time, thank you for watching.